Welcome to the Unriveted Podcast, where we talk about technology initiatives such as artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and people. Today, we have a special guest, Igor Belagorudsky. Well, you want to say that for me, Igor?
Belagorudsky. You did all right for an
Belagorudsky.
American.
I know. What can I say? Igor is CEO of Fast CTO, and Igor has several passion projects, and today he's going to tell us about one of his passion projects, and I'd love to learn more, Igor.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Passion project is one way to describe it. I would say it's a startup I accidentally launched, which happens every year or two, but it's a lot of fun. But basically, just to give people some context, because otherwise it seems like, why does this happen? Let me talk about myself for a second, just so you could see why my passion project is a passion project, I guess. I'm a startup guy. Startups my whole life. Came here when I was 10, originally from Ukraine. Had my first startup at 12, and basically it's been startups all the way. Most of my startups failed because, startups tend to do that. But a couple of startups succeeded, and sold my last startup about 7 years ago for about 60 million, and started Fast CTO as sort of like think of it as a co-op of CTOs that want to help startups. It's kind of like a nonprofit consulting company, which tries to make as little money as we can. And if we accidentally make money, we have an angel fund on the back end and we reinvest back into startups. And as a rule, for all of our clients, we recommend and hire only senior developers, because basically our motto is, don't make your startup a guinea pig project type of thing. Junior developers are great. I love them. But you really need to be mature enough and have a company that is able to train them up. Otherwise, your company becomes a guinea pig. But every once in a while, we come across a junior developer that, like a diamond in the rough, Aladdin style. Like you could just see a ton of potential. And we can't put them with a client because I think it would be unethical, really, for everyone. But we could give them an internal project to work on and see if our hunch is correct. So I would say App Buttons, this project that Martin's talking about, it kind of started as, cue music. Any startup does, out of a personal problem that I had. So about a year and a half ago, I had an issue and looked around, did a little Googling. Seems like nobody solved it. And I'm a nerd and I had a free weekend. So I made a Chrome plugin and solved my problem. Never planned on it being a startup. It's just like, I make scripts here and there. There's just kind of the benefit of knowing how to code, I guess. And I've been using it myself for like over a year. And then back in February, we came across this junior developer. Her name is Natasha. She's awesome. She's from Ukraine. And Natasha, just to give you some secondary context, 2 patents, mechanical engineer, unbelievably intelligent person, looking to change her career, wanted to become a software developer, and came to us through a friend. And we're like, okay, we could do something with this. And so, we started with Natasha, and I said, hey, listen, Natasha, for your first project, you want to launch a startup? which was a fun sort of thing. And, we started about February of this year and kind of polished it up a bit. And around September, launched what is now, or what was now, past, present, the ghost of startups past, because it's the season, right? What was in September, App Buttons. And in September, App Buttons was just a fancy way to solve my super niche problem, which amounted to basically having 2 types of people looking at our website. The 0.01% of people that have had similar problems that look at our website and say, holy cow, finally. And the 99.9% of people that look at our website and say, why does this exist? which is not which is not the metric you want for a startup. Which is why I accidentally launched it. Like, it wasn't really meant to be a startup. But a really interesting thing happened, because what App Buttons really does is something kind of almost stupidly simple. And it allows you to drag and drop a button onto any web page and have that button do something when you click it. Like, as far as an elevator pitch goes, it's pretty straightforward. It's got like one of these interesting things, which I think it might be the only startup launched this year without AI. There's no AI. We don't need AI. OpenAI could do its own thing, Bard and, all of them. We don't need it. Ours is way, way primitive. But here's an interesting thing that happened. As soon as we launched it, because I have the benefit of having been surrounded by all these CTOs, I started pinging all of our CTOs and saying, like, look at what we just launched. And one of our CTOs, his name's Bill. Bill calls me and he says, I work with this client outside of Fast CTO. They are a car dealership chain in New York that, come and talk to them. Tell them about App Buttons. And so I came and talked to them, and I'm talking to them, and their eyes are lighting up. Because to them, they're like, hold on a second. We use this tool. And I won't mention the name because I don't want to put anyone on blast here, but we use this tool. It's basically a CRM for the auto industry. It's got enormous market share. Think like, Salesforce plus QuickBooks plus everything for the auto industry. So in the auto industry, this thing is cutting edge. But if you and I looked at it, it's a dilapidated piece of garbage, right? Like, it looks like it's out of the late 90s, but it is web-based.
It is.
It is out of the late 90s. And there's no competition really, so there's no incentive to innovate, nothing, right? But it works. It works, and a lot of car dealerships use it. And now I'm talking to this car dealership, and they're a modern car dealership. They keep seeing ads for these things like MailChimp and SendGrid and Twilio and like all these things. Like, we want to use them. When somebody comes into our dealership and says, I want, I'm thinking about buying a whatever, I want to put them on a drip campaign. I want to do SMS messaging. I want to do all these things that this ERP CRM system just doesn't support. And all of these things that I want to do with it, they're hooked up to things like Zapier and Make and Pabbly and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But this thing isn't, right? So they go to me, Igor, if your App Buttons, when you click a button, can collect a couple of pieces of information off the page and send that to Zapier, you just jailbroke our CRM. You just connected this deprecated CRM to literally everything else in the world. They're like, can you do it? I'm like, okay, give me 3 days, because I'm a startup. Of course I can do it. So then we launched in September, immediately pivoted, and like a week later launched an update that can do exactly that. So now App Buttons, since basically like end of September, is a tool where you can drag and drop a button anywhere on any web application, click it. It can collect things off the page, off of input elements, form elements, div elements, spans, whatever headings. Put that into a nice little JSON, send it to an API or to Zapier or to anywhere else you want, and you just unlocked every app out there. And that's what App Buttons is. Now I'll shut up.
No, it sounds interesting. So App Buttons has been around for how long again, did you say?
Oh boy. I would say about a month and a half. Yeah, I'm counting. It's like a baby. You know how you count babies in like days and then weeks and months?
Right.
It's not rolling over on its stomach yet.
Okay. All right. Is there any particular industry or clientele that you see as a desirable fit, or at this point is it more of a fishing expedition? Whoever comes along will test the waters and see what people want and go with the flow, so to speak?
It's a little bit of both. And it's the first time I've been in this position. Every single startup I've launched to date, I knew my end user immediately. Like before I built it, I knew who I was selling to. I knew the audience, like product market fit, the whole thing. And it's mostly been like B2B enterprise, right? This empirically, I have no idea, because I would never have guessed car dealerships, right? I have no ins at car dealerships. Like even the people I lease my Nissan from, if I call them, they'll be like, "Who are you?" Right? Like I've got no ins. So now I'm in this really curious thing where I, air quotes, suspect, but really I know that just like car dealerships, just like auto dealerships, there are thousands of industries, big and small, that use hyper specialized web-based tools that have no incentive to innovate, that this thing could just change the landscape for. And what's interesting is we're not competing with these tools. I'm not looking to replace any of these CRMs, but the companies using these CRMs are A, frustrated, B, always looking around for what's new, what's whatever, right? So if anything, we make these CRMs stickier, because now, you might be using this, auto industry CRM, always looking around, hoping something new comes along, because you're missing this integration with MailChimp or whatever. Now you have this integration. Now you don't need to look around. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because on one end, I'm looking for these industries that we could help, having stumbled upon auto accidentally. On the other hand, I'm actually looking at these niche CRMs and like ERPs and all these other systems and reaching out to them almost as like, can we help your clients? Right? So it's kind of a dual prong strategy for now.
Yeah.
But who knows?
I could see this, Igor, in a few ways, for like a system integrator that is assisting a client with one of these bespoke systems, extend it without getting customization in the actual software.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That's exactly. And it's awesome because there's kind of a couple of different demographics of people. Obviously, like the car dealership example or any other of these niche industries, you've got a team, whether it's a sales team or customer support team or whatever team, professional services, etc., using these systems, wanting to have specific business processes, specific integrations, all that kind of stuff. App Button's perfect for that. But here's an interesting thing. I work with a lot of startups, right? So imagine you're even a startup owner, or like you work alone, or you and like one or two other people, right? You're not looking to like, oh, I want to integrate my entire sales team to use MailChimp, right? Maybe it's even your own product, right? Like we work with all these startups that build, marketplaces or SaaS tools or whatever else it is, right? And so as an example on completely other end of the spectrum, right? We have a client, they have a marketplace, and on top of this marketplace, they have a concierge service which helps their clients find, connections on this marketplace. And if you use this, it's a business marketplace, right? So it's not like,
Right.
small ticket items or multi-million-dollar businesses. So this the owner, the founder, and his team of concierges, right? They need functionality in their own application to support this concierge side of the business. And they've got developers. So like, let's say they're looking at a listing and they want to add it for one of their clients into like their short list somewhere. Now the owner could go to one of his developers and say, hey, can you implement this button that does this very esoteric bespoke thing? And the developer is going to be like, why for this one client do I want to do this? I only want to build functionality that serves all of our clients, et cetera, et cetera. And then even if they agree to it, it'll take them some time, et cetera, right? Or you download app buttons and 3 minutes later you have a button that does exactly what you want. And it doesn't touch the rest of your application. It doesn't bother your developers, and it's a win-win for everyone. So
yeah.
a lot of different doors to open.
Right. Well, I think Martin and I have had several conversations about, solid software development practices, which has been around for a long time, but that's definitely one of them right there is the, creating something that's extensible rather than having to go and rewrite something to integrate it with into a client system. So
yeah,
I think that's, that makes sense. I'll pivot the conversation a bit myself here. Since you have experience in startups in general, I think you've made mention of how you've had to pivot your own business very recently, but you have had your hands in other startups as well. I guess maybe it's a cliche question to ask, but I think still interesting, direct from the horse's mouth. What kind of advice would you give to people nowadays focusing on making a startup? And let me add a different layer to that. Martin likes my multi-pronged questions.
like I'll
but
get
wait,
my notes
there's
out.
more. So let me add some flavor to that question then. You made mention that your product has nothing to do with AI, right? Which is fine. When you see a whole boatload of startups right now that's everything they want to do is AI. So thinking about people that are interested in a startup right now, what kind of advice would you give them to think about solving a problem objectively, and maybe not with the blinders on of saying like it has to be AI? Like, do you have any advice on just keeping focused on the problem rather than the flavor of the month, which in this case would be AI, whatever?
How long is this podcast?
I just took up like 2/3 of it. So
yeah. Listen, there's a lot of advice, and the advice is very nuanced based on what exactly you're doing. So if anybody, by the way, wants to reach out to me afterwards, I'm happy to speak to anyone. But let me answer with an example. If you were to ask me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you were to come to me and say, I want to build a social, like a social site for, I don't know.
Guinea pigs?
Huh? For what?
For guinea pigs?
Guinea pigs. Great example. For guinea pig owners. And here's how I'm going to monetize it. I would have said, don't do it. Like you're competing basically with Facebook and everything else. Like I'm sure there's a LinkedIn guinea pig owners group, a Facebook guinea pig owners group, Instagram, like all this kind of stuff. I would have said, don't do it. Now in the last, I would say 5-6 years, I've actually changed my tune quite a bit. And one of my friends, Dan, actually kind of helped me see the light. So Dan is a wakeboarder. And about 2 years ago, he came to me and he said, I want to build a community-based app for wakeboarders where like you could follow other wakeboarders, barter equipment, blah, blah. And to me, I'm like, what's the TAM? Right? Like putting my investor hat on, I'm like, that's a tiny market. Like, why would you do it? But the world is 9 billion people. And so like whatever and I'm not calling wakeboarding ridiculous per se, but whatever your ridiculous super niche hobby is with this many people, if you congregate them all into one place, you're talking about tens or hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, right? So if you get the message out to them, you got a market. You've got paying customers, right? So you take that's like part of the question, John, or part of the answer. Take that concept with the following thing. Years ago, up until I would say 15 years ago, every startup I went after, I was going for a unicorn. Like $1 billion or nothing, like home run, right? And it's hard, right? And so my last successful exit, a company called eRecruit, we sold for about 62 million. but it took 8 years, right? And so if you actually break it down, and because I'll tell people, my last exit 62 million. They're like, wow. I'm like, well, we raised 30 million, and it took 8 years. So when you do the math, that's a whole lot of work for, frankly, not that much gain. And it's way, way harder to build a startup from 0 to, let's say, 15 million in ARR or revenue, right? Than it is from 0 to 1 million. And a $1 million company that has, a very kind of lukewarm, let's say 10% margin, 100K, right? Somebody who knows what they're doing can knock one of those out every couple of years, right? So now that's my entire, I'm not going for the $1 billion companies. I'm not even going for the $100 million companies. I'm going, if I can build a company that goes from 0 to 1 million, maybe even a little less, maybe a little more, but my target is 1 million. If it goes to 1 million at almost no margin whatsoever, if there's an opportunity for more margin, okay, but I'm not going after it. If I could do that every couple of years, a couple of years later, I've got a couple of companies, and it's just income coming in, right? That's my plan. That's my plan without buttons. That's my plan with everything. So now, John, back to your question, right? Combine those two and realize that you don't need to aim for a unicorn. A couple of $1 million in revenue and low burn is more than enough for a decent sized boat, and I'm not a boat person, maybe like an aftermarket Ferrari, whatever it is. So
aftermarket,
like used. I mean, used.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So like a Volkswagen engine with a plastic fiberglass body on
spray
it.
painted. I've seen that. The racing stripes. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. Each racing stripe adds like 10 horsepower to a car.
That's what it is.
From what I've heard. Yep.
I've seen
at least to the man or woman's foot that touches the pedal. You think it does?
Yeah.
Right. I liked your point there, Igor, because I mean, I myself have not, I've had a startup consultancy, not really like a product-based consultancy. And my mind has always been, it's like every day I have an idea and then, but you touched on something that I think probably it's happened to me and probably a lot of people that are hesitant. They're entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs. They want to be an entrepreneur, but that's the thing. I didn't come up with that term, Martin. Someone else came up with it. But I think that those 2 points right there is like saying, even if something seems like, ridiculous, like who's ever going to want something like that? Your point is that there's so many people on the planet now that, even a fraction of those people that are willing to pay for whatever you're building could still be a multi-million-dollar business. And also too, I think people get stuck up. They say, well, why would I do that? Because a company like Apple already does that, or a company like this startup already does that. Or there's 50 companies that do this same thing right now. Why does there need to be 51? And I've had those thoughts too. But at the same time, you think about it, and it's like the same thing about when you get automated phone calls and you're like, why do they do those? Like, you're like, why do they do those? And you're like, well, it must work for someone, right? So like, there's enough of a pie out there that your piece of the pie, although it might be a sliver of the pie, could still be a multi-million-dollar sliver of pie.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm not telling anyone to build a telemarketing platform. So
right, yeah, that was just an example. Don't do that.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and again, it doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to have no competitors. I will say that the other side of the coin of there now being so many people is that there's also a lot of noise, right? So I posted a couple of months ago, I think, kind of a thought. Let's call it a thought. That developing startups now versus, let's say, 20 years ago is on one hand way easier. Like something that would have taken me 6 months to build in 2000, I can build now in a weekend. On the other hand, it's way harder because, you know, the myth of if you build it, they will come is exactly that. It's a myth. So now you have to like market it out into just like a huge noise chamber, right? And so when you add those up, I suspect the average is about the same. You know, so on one hand it's easier to build, on the other hand it's much harder to get people to notice, right? And it's more expensive, it's all this kind of stuff. So, you know, but that shouldn't stop people from doing it. You know, there was
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. You should. The difference between success and failure is a fine line, and you need to fail a lot before you have a success. And I would never encourage anybody to give up because they had a small failure.
Even the big one.
Well,
yeah.
You know, the size of your failure doesn't judge, you know, not judging you by, you know, your small failure versus your large failure, but your ability to plow through and keep going and adjust.
Sure.
Super, super powerful for the entrepreneurial life cycle, for sure. Now we're pushing the closing moments of our podcast here. Igor, if you had to give any final words of wisdom to an entrepreneur in a 30-second soundbite, what would you do in you know, telling them the little things like product market fit, adoption, revenue, little stuff like that?
Oh, okay. In 30 seconds, starting now, I've got the following thing. Everyone makes mistakes, and the only way you make less mistakes is by having experience. So a little bit of a pitch for Fast CTO. Go look up Fast CTO, fastcto.com. We're here to help you with experience so you don't waste time and money. And we do this in a way that I like to call aggressively non-predatory. So that's, if you're building something out there, go check us out. I have 10 seconds left. Check out App Buttons. The way our pricing works is it's free. Unless you have many people and you all want the same buttons, it's basically free. I was using it for a year and a half myself. In a year and a half, I've accumulated 4 buttons. If you have less than 10 buttons, it's free. Go check it out. You got nothing to lose.
Awesome.
Buttons to gain.
Awesome. So great having you on here, Igor. With that, from our Unriveted crew, we will call that a wrap until we talk to you next time. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Bye for now.